Hello, my curious communicators. This is the Stump the Professor video for the Fantastic Four. I've taken some notes to prepare, and I am ready to get into responding to your curious communication questions. I think, for this one, I've got some overlap from question to question, so we'll just see how it all unfolds. The first question here, I'm just going to launch into it. How should leaders balance transparency about team conflict with maintaining credibility and trust in their leadership? This is a great question. So, how should leaders balance transparency about team conflict with maintaining credibility and trust in their leadership? And when I was, I just, this team did a great job of really discussing the questions and kind of drilling into them. And I really appreciated that. And we're really going to focus on when you have institutional authority, which is different than just trust in being a leader, because we're learning in this program that leadership does not have to have that title or institutional label for you to be a leader. And that nuance, I'm not going to really address the nuance of all of that right here, but I am going to address this question within the frame of what happens when you do have that authority. You are the supervisor, you are the director, you are the person that people are coming to, and maybe you're in charge of a team that needs to be productive, they need to be creative. And you want to be a part of that. I mean, maybe you have this job because you have a lot of passion and ideas and things that you want to jump into the mix and really and make a difference. Um, and so I think that becomes really difficult when you're in management positions, because as soon as you get launched into a management position, you hold a responsibility to for you're managing a lot of responsibilities. I think it gets more complicated. Not impossible, but you are managing your own persona, you're managing your team and the outputs and deliverables that your team is responsible for, and you're responsible for the organization itself. So you're kind of stuck in the middle of a lot of things happening, and you might have knowledge based on your position in the organization that is knowledge of privilege. It's the knowledge of management that, and there might be brackets around things that you know that are not meant to be amplified information, either amplified to other parts of the organization or amplified to the team that you are actually trying to build trust with. These things become super problematic, right? So now that I feel like we just set up the question. I have not given any answers yet. But I think we need to get into this idea of the word transparency to unpack that. We're also looking at this idea of credibility and trust. Uh, in the other class that I teach in this program, OL 633, Organizational Communication, I've really made this idea of trust the foundation of that class. And some of you have taken that class. Some of you are going to join that class next year, in the next school year when it's offered again. And there's a lot to trust. Let's just say um, that can get more complex. Not, it's complicated, but it can get complex fast. So let's rewind and talk about the word transparency. I think when we're talking about transparency, we're talking about this can mean a lot of things, but there's this feeling of being included and that there's access. So we're talking about inclusion and access. And when you are a person without power and you are trying to manage uh, your job, whatever that is in the organization, but you're also managing yourself and how your access and being included in information kind of informs you about your position of power, your position of being able to make a difference, of how you can influence things becomes really limited when you only get a slice of information. And transparency can become super important. And it's often why it shows up on core value lists. Is transparency one of your core values? Is it based in an ethical process for you? And there's that piece to transparency. And if we look at that, there's also things about why information is being, why you're not included in information, which can be not necessarily about inclusion or access. It could be about confidentiality. It could be about privacy or professional protocols within your environment. And those things are, they're sticky. They're sticky even in a romantic relationship. Like, does your partner get any privacy? Is self-disclosure the complete transparent self-disclosure a prerequisite for the health of a romantic relationship, or is it need to be balanced with some types of privacy? Because it is a human piece, a human part of our experience to have privacy. And yet we are struggling with that within our family relationships and our most intimate and personal relationships. Now, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm really talking about teams and when you have institutional label of authority. But I just bring it up so that we can see the vastness of this complicated idea of how we're talking about transparency. So you're in charge of a team and you are have the privilege of having more information than you're allowed to disclose to your team at all times. I think the first step is to be, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. You have to be transparent about transparency in the role that you have. I think it's good to be explicit, clear, and concise about that. It doesn't have to be a drawn out story of all the reasons why you can't share everything and how complicated you're. No, you just say, there are things that I know because of my position within this organization that I can't always disclose. I do want you to know that as soon as I am able to disclose information, I will be doing that. Okay. Like, however it needs to be from you and it needs to be authentic to you and the words that work best for the context of the situation. Make it your own, but knowing how to say something concisely and clearly and directly when you're dealing with sometimes a sensitive topic like this is actually really valuable communication skill. Here's a good place to apply it. So we're going to set up clear expectations and you're going to be clear about what you can share and not share and why. And that's okay. And I think you can say, this is what you can expect from me. This is what I expect from you. And I think it's better than pretending like it's not an issue. Oh yeah, let's pretend that I'm part of the team and I'm not a facilitator of this team or or I'm not the project manager of this team, whatever it is the role is. You need to say, nope, I have a dual responsibility. and you need to acknowledge that the issue exists. It does. The question is here, and I think this is a great question for this class because I think this is really boots on the ground of real life here and what we're managing in organizations. And so this means that I want to pivot at this point because I think how do you balance it? You have clear expectations, but and you can't when you approach. So I'm going to talk about this idea of credibility. Credibility is multidimensional. I'm going to try and remember all the dimensions right now that are laid out in the field of ethos. And in ethos, our credibility is made up of components of your character. And your character is your discernment about what is right and wrong. Your character is also the way that you respond and not react, and the way that you can manage how you are interacting in uncertainty and tolerate uncertainty. Just because it's easy to manage things when you know things, but in the uncertainty is really a good test of character. The other part of ethos is this idea of competency, that we're building our ethos through the ability to say what we know and to say what we don't know. And and you probably heard this is a pretty common thing we're hearing in our business culture or the culture, the professional world culture right now is one of the ways that you build your credibility is through, which is competency, is the lever I'm talking about, is actually owning up when you don't know something. And when we live in an age of we are in the fire hose of information. I don't know if there has ever been a time where you, as an individual, have access to so much information. It's not whether your parents have an old dusty encyclopedia set stashed up in the dining room or the living room somewhere, that is your only access to something that was written maybe not even in the last 10 years or 20 years, and you could look something up, but you could just push play and get information. Um, and that means that this idea of saying, I don't know, is looked at as, well, why don't you know? Or you should know. Or I don't know. I feel like there's some social expectation that we are putting that the weight of knowledge is on everybody's shoulders, but there's actually more power in not knowing, to not be an expert in everything. Because as soon as you're not an expert in everything, as soon as you say, I don't know, that means you can move into the relationship of knowing that you have people on your team. You have someone you can call and ask them. And I'm going to be in a dialogue of allowing someone to inform me about their expertise. So, my I've talked about my sister sometimes. I'm so proud of my baby sister, and she's a judge. And I, she definitely has to keep a lot of confidence on her job. There's a lot of privacy. She can't share a lot of her job with me, but sometimes she asks me about communication, and she calls me up and she says, "What do you think if someone is in this hypothetical situation, and or if I have to make a decision and I'm trying to figure out how to state this?" Sometimes she'll call me and ask me, "Isn't that nice? Isn't it nice to be called and asked about the expertise that you have?" Like, that's really incredible. And it strengthens our relationship when we lean into each other's strengths. even though I can't be a full working part of her job and my job is my job, we have ways that we include each other in because we know each other so well, we know how to access each other's strengths. And when you talk about the credibility of maintaining your own credibility, your competency of knowing your limit and knowing what you know, but also knowing what you don't know. And do you know the people who work for you? Do you added them to they're added into your group, whether you hired them or they were hired in a different way, but they're in your group. How much do you know what they can bring to you? What is their knowledge? Instead of, oh, I didn't, oh, here it is. I didn't, oh, you're talking about something? And I don't know what that is. Let me quick and look it up. Okay. And now I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say instead of going, whoa, you're talking about something I don't know about. Tell me more about that. So then I can I can add my expertise to that knowledge. That's like an incredible transparency, right? That another bubble of how to use transparency to build credibility and trust. So we talked about your character, discerning from right and wrong. We talk about and how to live in the tolerance of uncertainty. We're talking about competency and knowing your limits of knowledge. And we also want to talk about goodwill. And does your team see that you are bigger than this one little piece of information, whether you tell everybody as soon as you know or don't know? Is your goodwill transparent? Is your goodwill a norm that you are bringing in and now you might say, I wouldn't even have this job if I didn't care about my team and our deliverables and the impact our productivity can have. I wouldn't even be here. But does your team know that? Does How does your actions or your behavior or your daily interactions display goodwill? Now, it can get sticky because now we're into elements of culture uh, and how people are decoding things. So this is also a whole other topic that I would love to get. Ooh, it's just a yummy topic to think about. And I want you to um, really think about that in a very contextual way to the situation that you're in. Um, I I don't do it in this class, but in my organizational communication class, we have break room politics and we talk a little bit about food and the break room and the food and the birthday cakes and the microwave smells and blah blah blah, whatever it is. Um, these things kind of bubble up as little micro conflicts that can often feel passive aggressive or like or microaggressions against different cultural groups. And the way that you make a constant and deliberate effort to establish norms explicitly and readdress norms and adapt norms so that your own team has its own little mini culture. And that is when you are building up the goodwill of a group by allowing room for adaptation, to have conversation about what's appropriate and not appropriate. And I'm just not talking about those little quizzes you have to take or those little training videos and things like that. Like that is the legal layer of what is appropriate and not appropriate. But is it a functional piece of a rhythm of the culture of your team? And that also makes it so then when a conflict does pop up, or sometimes you can't disclose to your team, you've you have a bigger foundation to stand on than just that one little pillar of information. Or sometimes it's a massive pillar if you know something really serious is coming, like layoffs or pay freezes or vacation, whatever it is. There can be these can be huge pieces of information that you have access to, and you care about your team, and you are committed to this baseline inclusion and access to information. If you are establishing things much broader than just a moment of crisis, you're building a strong foundation. It will be an earthquake either way if you have to reveal something that it's obvious that you knew prior to you revealing it. And some people will be really reactive in that moment, and you can't really control that individual person's experience to getting information that is life changing if we're on that level of the information. Okay, so I'm just checking my notes because I feel like doing really well with this question, and we've addressed a lot of nuance to it. I think there's a couple of pitfalls or manholes you could fall into. Um, and one is this idea of friendship in the workplace. And you might be in a workplace and you had a friend prior to coming in. Maybe they're the person who helped you get your job, and now you're in a position of authority and they're in a subordinate position, or maybe you get promoted into a position of authority and you had been in that team place with a lot of self-disclosure and kvetching and complaining and oh my God, if I was in charge, what I would do, right? Like there's all these different dynamics that can happen, but specifically, however it shows up, when we're working day in and day out with people, relationships will develop. It is the attraction of proximity. And I don't necessarily mean physical or romantic attraction, though those things happen too. I'm talking about specifically those you work with people who you respect and you admire or you appreciate, and you know you could be really good friends with this person. Let's take the reins off this. Uh, I think if that develops out, uh, if that develops, again, the answer is be explicit. Say, hey, I'm moving up into this position, and we have relied so much on each other to self disclose. And just so you know, now that I'm in this position, we're going to lose that. My ability to share everything with you. And I I hate it. I'm going to tell you about everything else. And you're my person on the job who makes me feel like this job is worth it and makes me feel safe here. And so I never want to not disclose information as an injury to you. So I'm just saying it out loud and then have that conversation. That is a conversation. And there's other ways to go about it as well. That's not the only way. So the closer the relationship becomes, the more you need boundaries. And a boundary is something you keep, it's not what the other person keeps. Let's always remember that you need to state what the boundary is. You need to be explicit, clear, concise, and appropriate to the context of the situation. And then, if there is a violation of that boundary, it's not a blame game. It's not oh, I have to throw you away because you didn't respect XYZ. No, you need to say, actually, for yourself, you need to have that intrapersonal conflict where you are finding where you need to adjust your own what do you need to adjust? You need to be kind of have some feedback with yourself and have that clear, concise, honest conversation with yourself about what, how can I be better? Um, how can I respect this relationship and the situation, whatever it is? Sometimes we don't know we've crossed a boundary until it's in the rearview mirror. We're like just moving along our day and we're in the minutia of conversations and things. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait a minute, that conversation, it went a little farther than I expected. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said. That's leadership. That is leadership to even recognize it, even if you've already crossed the line. Um, you still like having those moments of clarity for yourself. And whether you feel guilty about it, I definitely don't want you to move into a shame spiral, but looking for where the repair could have happened. And then, if an apology is needed, be the first one to own it up. That's leadership. All right, let's see. I hope I gave you some interesting information here. There's there are more notes on this than I got a chance to talk to you, but we're going to move on to the next question. So the video's already, I just did question one and we're already 30 minutes in. So oops, I had a lot to say about that one apparently. Okay, the next question is, what are some best personal methods to maintain curiosity through conflict? Oh, I love this question too. Oh, I hope I don't talk for 30 minutes about curiosity. I have so much to say about it. But what are the best personal methods to maintain curiosity through conflict? Again, another beautiful discussion by this team as they discuss this question. And I really appreciated it because I think it's really coming through out of that discussion about flooding and gunny sacking and those things that Gottman says time to take a break, right? And it's not always simple as just take a break because sometimes when we're in the minutia of a conflict, being flooded is a narrowing. It's a narrowing of the experience, and there becomes this urgency in the narrowness that becomes really painful. And when it becomes really painful, we might kick into that pattern to move us towards the repair of the pain, right? I want to repair this pain that I'm in, and you're causing my pain, and I am having a hard time stepping away from the conflict to take a break. Uh, that feels painful too. So, how am I going to not screw this up if I'm in the narrowing place, and how am I not gonna like it's almost maybe it's a catch 22. Any choice you make feels like a painful choice, right? And that's a lot about conflict. I can't erase that. If I don't have a magic wand to make the pain of conflict go away, it's it's just going to be a part of the situation. Curiosity is the opposite of that narrow place. Curiosity is an expansion. We're going to expand our perspective. We're going to expand this worldview or this conversation, which is the opposite feeling when we're trying to survive it. So, this is listen, this is easy to talk about when we're in a nice, safe space. And I'm talking about theory and communication and all of these little tools you can use. You can go to the hardware store and pick up your tools. Getting those tools out and use them, ooh, that takes practice. It takes making mistakes. It takes injury sometimes. We want to minimize harm. That's my answer to question number 3 coming up. And it it I guess it just we need some grace that this is really difficult stuff to manage. So, a class like this, the way I've designed this class, is to give you as many choices in that narrowness as to use. And not every choice I laid out is the right choice for that moment or the right choice for you, right? And there's a lot more choices than I can do in a class, in a quarter system class, right? Like let's be clear, we move at rocket speed in a quarter system. And there's even more things that are available beyond this. So be curious about curiosity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, how do you make conversation space? I think conversation space can exist in different ways. When we're first trying to do it and we're first trying to manage the how to do this, we might think about a process, making a process a norm explicitly, right? Like, hey, this topic is really hard for me to talk about. I'm going to need to step away. Say that out loud. Or I can talk about this for this finite amount of time, and then I want to come back to it. Wherever we left off, let's make a note of it, and I want to come back. And you might need an explicit process to get this going. Maybe yes, maybe no. It might feel too clunky. That might feel too clunky and weird to do. Definitely, if I was in a situation where I was the third party coming in and trying to manage curiosity in a difficult conflict situation, I would make that a norm or part of the process, and we would take it step by step. Um, and but we don't always have process with us. So the other thing is to say, hey, just give me um oh, I have a response for that, but I need a minute to think it through. And it's always good to restate what the other person stated. Sometimes I'm not talking about mirroring, though that is it, but just saying, hey, so you're saying you're upset because of XYZ. Let me just give a minute to think about that and how I want to understand that better. What do you do in the space? What are you doing in the space? Are you trying to just think of what to say? Are you trying to think of your rebuttal? Does it, are you, you don't have to think about anything, actually. You could just loosen your jaw, try and follow your breath. Follow your breath is notice that you are breathing. And if you're not breathing, try and get that going. It doesn't mean you have to take a deep breath. People can be really aggressive in taking big breaths, and sometimes that can make things worse. If you have to do some deep breathing exercises or square breathing exercise or some dragon breathing exercise, maybe step away if the conflict and just say, I'll be right back, you know? But when you step in this space, even just noticing your breath and then going to speak might just need the space you need to maintain your curiosity. I don't know. I don't know what do you need? I guess if I were to ask a follow-up question here, is there a difficult situation you were in where you were able to maintain that shut down feeling or that flooded feeling and stay leaned in a way where you were allowed to be listened to and you were doing the listening? Because remember, curiosity is an openness. Curiosity is wonder. It's an exploration. It's an adventure, right? That's what I think of when I think of curiosity. And when you're confronted with a conflict situation, even if it's serious and you're mired in the pain, there should hopefully there's a motivation. You're talking about, are you still motivated to get to a different perspective other than your own? And is the person you're talking to motivated to be curious about you? So I think this is an important piece to this question. So, one of the things I wrote about for this question is this idea of you're feeling the narrowness coming at you. You're feeling your heart, your physiological response to what the other person is saying. You are could feel yourself clicking into your pattern, and you have a scripted response that you are going to come out because you already know where this is going. I know this conflict. My brain recognizes it's really painful down the road. Click, click, click pattern, right? So the narrowness is coming. How how soon can you interrupt this process? Sometimes you can't interrupt it at all. You only see it in the rearview mirror and you go, dope, I better make sure that I don't make that mistake again. Can I rewind it? When was the last point where I had a choice? And how soon can the interruption come? Is it just the topic itself? Well, if you are in a relationship you value, you're going to need to move through that and find out a way and include that other person saying, this is an important topic. You're important to me, but I feel myself shut down as soon as the topic comes up. What can we do to, or here's what I need to be a really good listener. Like if we were sitting across the table and you bring up this topic and I am just going to move to my narrow place and click in, the walls are up. So maybe if we were on a walk, maybe if we could go for a walk or go for a hike for the day, and then we can, while we're on the hike, if we can take small moments to take little bites at this, right? What's the saying? Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I never want to eat an elephant, poor elephants. But I think there's a little saying like that. Or how do you eat a whale? I don't want to eat a whale either. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. I got distracted by my own little saying that came into my head. But that idea of one bite at a time, maybe this doesn't have to be a big chunk. Maybe we can go for a hike this weekend and let's make sure we bring up the topic somewhere along the hike and take a few minutes to talk about it. Something, first of all, when you can get your body in a place of activity, and maybe it's not a hike, maybe it's a puzzle, maybe you're going to sit at a table and do a puzzle together. I mean, as soon as you distract yourself with an activity of some type that everyone can participate in, and you bring up the topic, it's less interrogation. So think about how you're setting the scene so that you can maintain your curiosity. I think that I think the last thing okay, I do have one more thing. Oh wait, no, this is for wait. Yeah, I think this is a good segue into the next question from our Fantastic Four, is that curiosity is valuable. It it is an important skill to be able to regulate emotions and maintain curiosity. It does have limits. curiosity also has a limit. When we talk about staying curious, we we can be too curious and it can flip and there's a dark side to curiosity that can feel like that interrogation, and it can increase harm, especially if someone isn't ready to talk about a topic, or if they're feeling like they want to stay private about something, which I just talked about with the transparency question. I think that works here too. So, and where is the burden of self-disclosure? Are you just trying to be curious and I got to know everything you're thinking and I got to know your worldview? Or is the burden of self-disclosure also on you? Are you allowing for true dialogue in this, or are you interrogating another person? Just something to think about. There's lots of ways to come at this question. All right, I've got my last answer here, or my last response. Oops. Question number 3 from the Fantastic Four. Question number 3 from the Fantastic Four. How do you recognize ethical limits of engagement? Wow, these questions just all go together so beautifully. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. I hope I did, but if I didn't, it's been a while now. Oh, yeah. All right. So, how do you recognize the ethical limits of engagement? I think when we talk about conversation, a, a diagnostic way to look at what's happening in a conversation is if I stopped asking questions, if I stopped being curious, if I stopped being honest, and if I stopped self-disclosing or trying to make my point or give another fact, is there a response? Is the other person also doing their work to be involved in this conversation? When we talk about managing a conflict, we're trying to increase our choices inside that communication event. Increasing our choices is dialogue. It's allowing room for influence, and that means how you listen and how you engage in understanding. And that takes intention. It takes a type of it takes room. There has to be wiggle room for putting your foot, putting your foot in the mouth, saying the wrong thing, backtracking, going, oh, I could have said that better. There's a dance to it, right? And when we're talking about the ethical limits of engagement, we always want to remember more communication is not always better. Less can be more. It's not more communication isn't. Remember, communication is probably why you have this conflict to begin with. So not all communication is good. Communication can be weaponized. Communication has an ethical limit to it. And when we talk about the quantity and the quality of the conversation event, are we, are everybody that's involved, is there consent? Is everyone involved in the conversation consensually there? Is everyone, is every voice allowed in the conversation? Even if even if they're clumsy and they don't know how to say what they're saying. And I mean, you are in a class right now to increase your competency level of how to engage in these difficult moments. Most of the people you interact with have not had this high a level of pausing and paying attention to how to engage in a conversation. So I think the word safe is kind of loaded, and not when we're talking about painful and difficult moments, uh, how we define what's safe. We definitely we need a baseline of safety, meaning people are allowed to be themselves. They're allowed to say, I've had enough and I need a break and walk away, and it's not an injury to you, even if it causes a really painful experience, depending on your own experience. That can feel like someone pushed you off a cliff. Safety is allowing space to exist for people to be individuals. That doesn't mean canceling out that your need has to be more important than another person's need. So remember the repair of taking a break, and I'm just going to restate it now just in case, so you don't have to look it up again, or if you are new to this information, that if you're the person who is being left and that feels like you got pushed off a cliff, there needs to be, if you know that's you, you need some power back. And that power usually comes in how long is the break? Uh, okay, you're going to go, you need a break. I need you to return within 15 minutes. I need you to return within the hour. If something happens and you can't, I need you to contact me, right? You need to be able to state your need as well while allowing room for that other need. And Gottman has a lot of protocols around this, and you can watch videos, read articles at the Gottman website, or the book Fight Right goes over it as well. It's a process, and it needs care. I'm not able to go through it all as I'm answering all three of these questions. And that element I already talked about, that idea of reciprocity. So that conversation diagnostic, if I stopped, is there a conversation happening at all? Is there someone else on the other side of this? Or have I been doing all the self-disclosure? I've been asking all the questions. I've been doing all the work of it. So is there reciprocity? And is there a possibility of influence? And I use the word influence quite a bit. That also comes from the Gottmans. Thank you, Gottmans. Yay. Uh, that influence means that the other person, what the other person is saying, you can shift a perspective. Now, maybe it's not going to be about the decision or the value, if it's a moral issue, you may not be able to shift at all on some pieces, but can you find one little thing to be influenced about? Can you find value in that this person has a different experience than yours? Um, okay, we can't agree about Y and Z, but I actually can agree on X. That's something. That is something. And it's not to be taken lightly. It can be everything that keeps that common ground and keep us engaged in the ethical pieces of a dialogue. I think when we say, how do you recognize the ethical limits of engagement? Is continued engagement, is continuing in this conversation, reducing harm or increasing harm? Okay. I had so much more to say, but I think that's a good stopping place for the Fantastic Four's excellent questions today. So thank you, everybody. You put so much beautiful work into the roundtable discussion you had and the conversation around these Stump the Professor questions. They were a real joy to dive into them. Thanks.